Antalgia is a band from Spain, and they formed in 2008 and have made 2 albums as of today. This album being the second album, which was released in 2016. The band is known as symphonic progressive metal, and the lead singer has actually left the band. I think she left in 2019 or something, and although this being their last album of 2016, which is a fair while ago, and they have lost their singer and haven't got a singer at the minute. If you look on their Facebook page, I still think they are an active band. They were discussing album 3, as this is 2. So, yeah, a band from Spain, pretty good, by the name Antalgia, if I'm even pronouncing that right. And it is a progressive symphonic metal album. It's not really symphonic, I think it's more just heavy metal with some slight progression to it. Female fronted, and yeah, came out in 2016. So, the album length is over an hour, so you do get some good length out of this album, and it being female fronted. The typical thing, which I have actually spoken about many times on my channel, for those who are new, you won't know what I have the opinion on when it comes to female in metal, if not rock bands. And my opinion is, if you look at females who are singing within metal, you tend to have like a handful of what you're gonna get. You get the people who are like Nightwish, where they just belt out operatic shit, while the verses are bare bone with just basically a drum beat or a bass line. And that is about it, which is mostly done for the sheer reason that it's a female singing and their voices are not as powerful and bass driven as that of a male vocalist. Therefore, the band has to strip everything down so the vocalist is not basically drowned by the sheer aggression that the band brings to it. So, yeah, you get the Within Temptation, Nightwish style shit where all of the singing is basically kind of symphonic in nature, and they all have a very similar sound, and then the verses are all technically exactly the same, and then when it comes to the chorus, the guitars do come in, but it's very spaced and open, so they'll belt out a chord and let it kind of ring out, so they're not overdoing it, because again it will drown out that of the singer. Other things you get is basically things go a little bit more poppy in nature for female fronted singers, where they're very, very girly and therefore the music kind of follows in nature. And this is what I'm getting at. It's very hard to find a metal band with a female singer which actually has the band stayed true to metal, where the riffs are incredibly powerful. It's incredibly technical in sound. Usually when it's a singer, it's very operatic, therefore all the sound is very open and very light, or their voice is very high and bright and poppy, therefore the music follows in nature. You don't get anything truly aggressive with a female voice. It does happen, I'm not saying that is completely void and doesn't happen. There are bands with female singers which do it, but they are very rare, and it's very hard to find a female voice where the band actually remains doing what they're supposed to and not dropping things in order for the female to do it. So I'm saying this because when it comes to Antalgia, the music remains. Nothing is really dropped, especially with this album. Their first album, which I have listened to, is a lot more on the symphonic side. So it has a lot more kind of melody to it, and the voice is a lot more kind of lighter and melodic. As for with this album, Twisted Dreams of Dark Commander, it is unbelievably fucking heavy. Unbelievably heavy. This is heavier than bands like Bullet for My Valentine has ever friggin' been. This is heavier than anything Avenged Sevenfold has done. This is heavier than Defecto. This is incredibly heavy. The fucking gain that they have going through this is incredible. Now let me tell you something, the bass player, like a typical bass has 4 strings, this bass player is playing with 6 strings. That is a lot of fucking bass. Now usually another thing with bass players, they usually just keep the beat going. Because when you're live and you're playing guitar and all the drums are going and everything, the sound kind of drowns out and you can't even hear yourself. Therefore the bass is there so the guitarist can kind of feel and hear that bass, so they know the tempo and timing. And that is all it really is. It's basically just the beat, and that is what the bass does, as well as somewhat the drums. This bass player is going at the same technical range of that of the guitarist. You can see them videos on YouTube of them actually making this album, which is how I know how many strings and how technical this bass player has been. He is finger picking, so there's no actual pick, it's all fingers, and he's using 6 strings, and he's not using 1 string at a time, oh no, and just keeping a beat. He is doing very, very complex stuff. He is utilizing all the strings. It is very fast, very technical, because that is the next thing with this band. As I said, this is incredibly heavy, and when it comes to actual verses, they are not just playing chords. It's not just a verse where it's just keeping, oh, let's just do something heavy. No, this shit is technical. To play some of these verses, you have to be one of them really good guitarists. It's not something for the person who is just learning guitar, or just a person who has somewhat of an ability. This shit is technical, their verses get very fast. Like, they have the gent stuff, obviously, to keep some things quite heavy. They do have the typical just belt out a chord, just to give that heavy, just belt something. But every now and then, they'll do some really fancy technical stuff. It's not all technical, they're not doing friggin' Dragon Force where they're just going 10 to the dozen. No, they don't do that. It's basically just some very heavy, aggressive plucks of like a power chord or something, and a lot of shifting between chords, and then you'll get all these flourishes. You get an unbelievable amount of flourishes through a lot of these verses, where it's just very technical, and their hands are stretched like bloody spider legs and everything. It's very technical, and that is just verses. This is not solos, this is not showmanship as you are listening to the vocals and the overall performance. But holy hell, is the technical feat of these verses quite something. Now, as for the female, obviously, as I say, when she sings in a verse, they are belting out incredibly aggressive guitar tone, as well as very aggressive and non-stop bass action, as well as putting in all these extravagant flourishes. How does the female hold up? Well, she belts it out 10 to the dozen, I will say. She is not operatic, because if she was to try that with things like this, dear God, would it sound shit. She doesn't sound poppy, because again, that would sound a little stupid. She is very, very powerful. She has a lot of energy to her voice to really get it high up over all of what the band is performing. Her voice has to be belted out higher to stand ahead of all what the band is putting out there. So let's talk about the first track, Endless Game. Now, this is an actual track. It's not like other bands where they do a fucking 20-hour bloody intro until you get to the song. Oh no, this track has its intro within the track, and then it is going into the song, which is the way I kind of like it. A bit of a build-up, not too long, is stuck in with the first track, and it actually gives you a track instead of wasting your time for minutes on end for no reason at all. Then you get into the track, which then has an actual intro, meaning the intro track is therefore pointless. This band has none of that crap. So you get a bit of an intro, it kind of sounds acoustic in nature, and then you get incredibly distorted guitar, guttural, demonic sound. It is very dirty and gritty in sound. Very heavy, unbelievable bass, and it lightens up a little bit, which is mostly these just one-off kind of key tone presses, just to give it this kind of little bit of a lift. But as I say, the drum and the bass and the guitar being so many strings and playing so aggressively with so much gain, it is very heavy, so the only thing to pierce through in a soft thing is just these one-off key tones. When the singer actually comes in, she's belting out, and it is quite a slap in the face because it's not soft and it's not melodic, it is very, very intense and powerful. So when I first heard it, I wasn't really sure about it, but it does grow on you. You just need to kind of accept it and then kind of hear the rest to actually understand she is capable of a more melodic side. She's not just something that belts out, lyrics. When it comes to the pre-chorus, it just gets even more intense as the band is just dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, just belting out these chords as she's just power projecting these vocals. So it's just really heavy with the band just belting out some chords, just these slight pauses, and it's just very intense. And then the interesting part, which is a very interesting part of the band itself, is when it comes to the chorus. Obviously, as I said, you've got your acoustic kind of intro, very heavy, intense intro after the acoustic, with some very heavy verse and technical belting vocals. The pre-chorus is just being very bass driven, very aggressive and straight to the point with belting vocals again. So when you get to the chorus, it's just like there's so much aggression, so much belting. If this kind of runs through the entire album, it's just going to get incredibly stale and dull. So what does the chorus do? It goes in a kind of poppy area. It gets very poppy-ish. Now, don't underestimate, the instruments are very, very heavy in the gain still. It is very metal. It's heavy gain, really intense bass, but played in a pop kind of way, with the vocals going quite light and with some amazing soars in certain elements through this chorus. And it's really nice because the band clearly isn't going, we need to just open the sound up and be done with it. Because it's a chorus, it has to be really open. Let's give the spotlight to the vocalist, which a lot of bands do. Or it's just, it needs to be very catchy and poppy. No. Clearly it needs to be catchy because this is the chorus, this is the memorable part that you need. And the rest of the song has been incredibly heavy, so you need that melody to come out through the song. The band knows this, but they are a metal band. They are also aware of this, where a lot of other metal bands for some reason fucking forget what genre they are. So the instruments maintain that bass and that fucking gain, and they do not lighten up. It's still technical. They are not just belting out a chord and letting it ring out for goodness how long, just to open everything up so it's not too intense and it doesn't overshadow the vocalist. No, they play it in a poppy way, so it's got this real upbeatness to it, but it's really bass driven, it's very heavy. And then the vocalist just lightens everything up, and then she takes the melody while the band isn't technically taking a melodic point due to the tone of the instruments, but do play along with the vocalist. It's a really, really good take on how to make a beautifully nice sounding chorus, which is catchy but yet maintains brutal, intense heavy metal. Yet it is melodic and it is beautiful and it is catchy, but it's still very fucking heavy and has more testicles than that of Avenged Sevenfold and the band like Defecto. It is quite astonishing how they have come up with this, and technically I don't know why bands don't do it, because it's not really that difficult when you think about it. Now, going back into the verse, it is mostly the same as well as your chorus until you get to the solo. The solo, now let's talk about this. The solo, very, very technical, very, very aggressive, and that is quite consistent with the solos through the album. Most solos on the album are very technical and very aggressive in sound. He does not really do melody very well. It's an improvement from the first album, which is kind of weird because the first album is more symphonic and a lot more open in scope. And then when he goes into a solo, he's just absolutely blitzing everything, which makes most of the solos on that album sound rather out of place. on this album, he has a better tone to it. It definitely has a very loud impact. His solo really is loud and sticks out above the other instruments. It's very loud. It's still technical, but he does put a bit more effort into giving a bit more of a melodic take. If it's basically just slowing down to focus on just a kind of catchy riff or just an interesting kind of lead, it doesn't really go into the soft melodic nature. The best he really does is just going into just a decent sounding kind of lead, and then he just goes back to technical again. That's most of the solos on the album. Embrace the Storm, the second track, kind of follows in the same line as Endless Game, very, very heavy, with a bit more of a kind of pop-like chorus. After the solo with Embrace the Storm, I do think it goes kind of clean, which is kind of nice, and then it builds. The Valley of Broken Dreams. This is another very amazing feat. Now, one of the people who follows me on the channel really dislikes melodic metal tracks. I'm not saying he dislikes all of them and he's closed-minded, it's just he just doesn't appreciate them unless they do it in a really solid way. And I actually think this will be a track which he will appreciate, mostly because it is melodic metal. Now, with other bands like Bullet for My Valentine and just many, even Defecto, suffer very hard when it comes to making a melodic track, because usually the band just strips everything. They take out the solos, they take out the aggression, they take out the bass, they take out the gain, and it's very slow, and it's very dull, and it's just boring and slow. Like, you can appreciate it for what it is, but it isn't that aggressive metal, which the Valley of Broken Dreams is. Now, of course it is going to be lighter and more melodic than Endless Game or Embrace the Storm, because then how the fuck are you going to bloody tell that it's a melodic track? But what they do is, again, the band don't remove the gain, they don't take out the bass. It still has a heaviness about it. It's just the way they position their instrumentation and the way they play and utilize the song in order to project a melody, as well as use the vocalist in a different key tone, to have her take lead on the melody, use the keys in order to give that melodic undertone, while the band maintain the metal portion of the genre and keep that fundamentally there in the groundwork, and then just build it around the song. Therefore, you get an incredibly metal yet melodic song. And the chorus of this one, of course, just absolutely soars. The vocalist belts out these incredible notes, and the melody just works with her. It's an incredible chorus which really works, and it is very catchy. It's one of the better tracks, actually. It's only a pity that the guitarist, when it comes to solo, doesn't kind of utilize it in the same degree. He still, as I mentioned before, does his solos in a typical, you know, technical, and then slow down and just do some kind of interesting lead whittle of some sort of degree back to technical. He never really slows it down to do something really melodic and beautiful with some beautiful holds. It's very rare that he does that. He does some kind of holds which sound very nice, but other than that, he never really slows it down and does, you know, something kind of blues or something, you know, a different thing, variation. It is quite constrained and just, oh, this is heavy metal and there we go. The next track, The Dark Commander, goes back to heavy again, with the focus on having that real catchy poppy chorus, with not you know, disappearing and taking out that very aggressive musical element. Now, getting into a bit more change, the following track, Absent in Paradise. This is a really good track, because I think it's this track that has a lead at the start, and this really adds to the song, because the lead at the start is just got so many soaring portions to it and some amazing holds. good tone, good melody to it, and some little flourishes, but mostly it's just a lot of incredible holds, and the tone just sounds incredible, and it really just adds to the song. The only problem is there is no solo later in the song. It is the start of the track that is the solo, which is a problem, because if the band did all these epic leads into the song, it just gives so much energy and weight to the song, and then have another solo just to beefing the that portion of the song up a bit. It would really help, but unfortunately it means that later in the song you kind of feel like there's something missing, but the start of the song just starts with such an incredible hit because of that lead. So I appreciate the lead, but I'm irritated that the lead was took away from where the lead is supposed to be, because that portion of the song sounds empty. As for the start now, sounds incredible, better than all the other intros that the band has done. The further interesting thing with Absinthe and Paradise and how the tracks now go forward is they start putting more emphasis on the melodic nature, as the previous songs have kind of followed a similar pattern. This is where it starts changing, and you start not knowing where the band is going to go. So what Antalgia does is basically the song can start soft with pianos and then build into the heavy nature and then go into very heavy verses. But then the second portion of the verse can then go melodic and piano based. Or the verse is very heavy and then the pre-chorus goes to piano and melodic. Or it's just heavy pre-chorus, melodic chorus. Or it's heavy chorus and then the second verse is melodic. You don't really know what the fuck's happening. But it basically means that instead of just getting bombarded with a lot of heavy, even though I didn't mind it in the other tracks, it did start waning on you. And then at the perfect timing, when it becomes a little bit much and you want a bit of a change, they just constantly just start shifting things around, where you get incredibly heavy with portions where there's just vocalist and piano, which is very soft and melodic. And then it goes to absolutely ball-crushing heavy metal beyond anything heavy that I really listen to, combined into one, which I think is absolutely fantastic, because you get your heavy aggression, but then you don't get too tired of it. You have that slowdown and that great focus on melodic and melody, and it just really helps. Because, as I said, if you have one song which is just a complete chunk of just this track, all we're going to do is heavy, it's just a bit stale. When you get a track where it's like, it's heavy, it's soft, it's catchy, here's a solo that's intense, or here's a solo that's soft, and the track keeps shifting into all sorts of different realms, and you're pleased in each thing. It doesn't get stale, it's always moving the track. The song always evolves, it adapts, it shifts. It always remains interesting. It means every time you listen to the track, it doesn't really get as stale as easy, it doesn't get as repetitive. The first few tracks is a lot more easier to remember than the latter tracks, because there is a lot more to it. There's a lot more to remember and to digest. Staves of Time, that song is starts melodically and then it builds. And I like that because it hasn't been in any of the previous tracks, and it just has more focus on melody, where the songs become half melody, half balls to the wall, fucking unbelievable aggression. And I love that. Some of these tracks are the better tracks for solos, so Staves of Time as well as I think The Seventh Day. I think these are the longest solos on the album, and therefore have the most variation, because there's more time to, actually do shit. So I actually really appreciate this, and yeah, they're definitely the best solos. I don't know if it's both of these tracks or just in one, but Staves of Time on Seventh Day, if not both, one of them tracks have an unbelievable solo with some great length to it. So you get a lot of variation and a lot of, guitar solo for your listen. The vocalist even starts utilising some different things. So in Staves of Time, I believe when she approaches the song, you hear her in the background as they just slowly turn the volume knob up until she reaches that peak, and then all of a sudden, slight pause, belting out, and then she's there in your face. I kind of like that because it's just a different take. It's something new. And as I keep emphasizing, when you keep doing something new and interesting, which works, it just means you're getting so much more and nothing becomes stale and repetitive. You could do the greatest song ever, but then if you hear it multiple times over and over and over, you're going to get fed up of it. My favourite band, Avenged Sevenfold, they're my favourite band. I listen to all the albums absolutely to death. Therefore, my favourite band, I can't stand listening to their albums because I'm so fed up of them. And that is why you need something that has all these different flavours, so then you are always getting something new with each listen instead of something very easily digestible. Therefore, you can get used to it and then you move past it. This is why you need change in the songs to keep adapting with some interesting techniques and ideas. It also shows the technical sides and all the variations of what a band can deliver. Other things the vocalist does in these later parts of songs is there's a portion of a track where it sounds like she's on an intercom. So if you're going around the shops and then it comes onto the intercom, or maybe on a flight or something, she has this type of effect. I don't know if it was in the latter track Stage of Time, or if it's in the latter portion of the track The Seventh Day. I'm not entirely sure of this one. The worst track on the album is definitely When the Lights Go Down. This is again a melodic track, but it doesn't utilise the perfection of the way The Valley of Broken Dreams did. And by this I mean Broken Dreams had melody and this eerie tone to it, with a beautiful sounding chorus which didn't lack aggression in instruments but didn't also lack melody in other aspects of how the band portrays what they're doing, as well as the vocalist and some kind of key sounds. When the Lights Go Down, it's mostly just slow and kind of piano and vocals. Honestly, the band do kind of come in and there's some decent elements. The chorus is pretty decent. Still nothing like The Valley of Broken Dreams, where her voice just is really powerful. It's just slow. As the rest of the album has had all this energy and aggression to it, and when it comes to the chorus, just absolute beauty, but still maintains absolute energy. It's just soaring choruses, which goes into these really catchy, beautiful sounding choruses with real intense aggression. When the Lights Go Down, it's just like mid-tempo, slow, everything kind of stripped back, and it's like they've kind of lost what really works. They kind of lost the ball on this one. Temples of Sand, again, as the previous tracks, Absent from Paradise, Stage of Time, and Seventh Day, you get really heavy stuff with a catchy chorus, and then it's elements of the track, it goes into something a lot more melodic, and then comes back with sheer aggression, then some catchy poppy elements, then sheer aggression to melodic, and then constantly just shift things around. The last track, The Enemy Inside, this is 10 minutes, 1 second, so I guess 10 minutes, to be honest. Who gives a shit about the 1 second? So this is a hefty length track, and as I say, the album does go over an hour, and most of the tracks are around the 5 minute to 7 minute mark, so you do get a lot of track. As I say, there is a lot of evolution and differentiating from track to track, and just a lot packed into one track as they keep changing things. And sometimes they don't even go back to the same verse. They do the verse, never meet it again, and just go off and do something completely different for the rest of them. Goodness knows, 5 odd minutes. It's pretty incredible. So The Enemy Inside has 2 solos, I believe. The first solo that comes up is a decent length and does have some nice flourishes. Most of it is kind of lead work, which sounds kind of like lead kind of riffs. So it's not really melodic or really kind of open up at all, again, which I really do kind of want to hear from the band, but it is nice that it is more of a focus on just doing a nice sounding kind of lead, and then every now and then you put the flourish in to then kind of have the solo progress. The second portion of the solo, again, kind of plays along to the same degree. I don't think it's as effective as the first portion. And again, this song goes through all the changes of soft melody with clean guitars, or kind of, you know, the key things, and then balls to the wall aggression. The vocalist belting out some soaring vocal performance, or doing something really, really straight and tight, where she just belts out the word. She doesn't hold it, she just belts it out, and it's just like, there it is. Very sharp, very aggressive, and straight to the point, which she does in some tracks, especially in the tracks before Absinthe in Paradise. She just belts them out, and then after that, her voice kind of just opens up and she holds onto the notes a bit more. So that is pretty much the album. So, what do I think? It's pretty damn great. Like, there's only one track that really doesn't stand with the rest, which is When the Lights Go Down. Not that it's a bad track, it's just all the tracks just work so well. And then that track just kind of came down, which means it does kind of stand out a little badly. The vocalist is female. It's great to hear a female that really stands up in metal and is actually in a band that is more aggressive than a fuck ton of bands that are even out there. It's not the fake heaviness of Slipknot, where it's just they kind of just vomit into the mic and just has a sore throat, and the guy needs to take a bloody, cough drop and maybe have a drink of lemon sip or something, I don't know. And just basically just whack the living daylights out their instruments, just whack on the instruments, let's put the sound mixer on the friggin' stage, let's put a DJ fucking out there, and then a guy who has a sore throat. That's metal. This is true metal. This is true metal. It is incredibly heavy. It is an absolute showmanship from start to end from the band. The bass player has absolute incredible technical feats. He's playing with 6 friggin' strings and all he's using is fingers. He is very, very fast and he utilizes all the strings, and he is playing the same shit as the guitarist. So in the verses where there's all these flourishes, the bass player is doing exactly the fucking same. That is a talented bass player. The guitarist is doing some very technical sounding riffs, as well as maintaining beauty in choruses. So they know that, which is great songwriting. The fact that they know that they are metal and do something very, very, very aggressive and technical, and when it comes to the chorus, they keep that metal there, but have it more catchy and have the melody. It's something Ozzy used to do back in his early career instead of what he does today, which is just fuck knows God knows what, and best not to talk about really. Where it's just incredible sounding riffs, absolute aggression, with a really nice voice that keeps the melody, and when it gets to the chorus, it's just incredibly friggin' catchy, with some technical solos. And that is what this band does. They don't forget that. They are metal. They do technicality out the wazoo on this friggin' album throughout all tracks. The melodic track, well, one of them at least, maintains a heaviness yet maintains the melodic nature. It's an actual metal melodic track for once. And it's a friggin' female, which is absolutely fantastic to see a female actually stand with the guys and actually perform something that is truly that heavy without the game being turned down, or just have the band just disappear altogether because the vocalist can't do it, and you get the same repetitive shit that you get out of friggin' Nightwish. Yes, I respect Nightwish for what they do. Their symphonic nature and everything is incredible, and the vocalists are incredible, but it's like they can only do one thing, therefore the music gets incredibly repetitive. Now, a lot of people are simple-minded, therefore that's why the band does so friggin' great. But for a person like me, it's just absolutely boring at this point. It was great when I first heard it. For a few times it was pretty great. But I've heard it now and I'm fed up and I'm moving on. So it's just absolutely fantastic to hear a female that stands with bigger testicles than that of most metal singers I've actually heard. As I said, this is incredibly heavy. It's heavier than Defecto, Avenged, so many metal bands I've heard. And this is very heavy. Incredibly technical. It's great just to get verses where the guitarist actually does flourishes instead of just, I'll just save it to the solo and just basically be lazy for the rest of the song. No, he uses his technical aspects. There's flourishes all over the place. It's just amazing just to listen to him in a verse. You can just listen to him, or you can just listen to the bass because the bass player is doing stuff. Each member is doing something incredible. And then the solos, although I want more variation next time, it's still very technical and still very, very good. And then some good length. And then he does have his parts where he does open up and then do some nice holds where the tone can actually sing and actually be melodic. And then the female, she belts out. She is so powerful with her voice, just belting these things out and very aggressive. And then she does have that melodic side where she just has these nice high swords, and it's very incredible. There's great length. The album has good length to it. There's some technical solos. The whole thing is technical. There's a fantastic melodic track which is actually pure metal. The songs constantly adapt and shift. The only problem is just the solos. I want something that really slows down and goes melodic. And I want I've lost my train of fucking thought now. What else? Crap. That one track is slightly bad. So if we went for that one track and then the solos was, did more melody, this would be pretty damn near perfect. So that's all I really need in the next one. Just basically don't do when the lights go down type of thing, make everything consistent, and then just do more melodic solos. So as it stands, this is pretty much a 9 out of 10. Because it is really damn good. The only fault just being one track, and then the solos are a little bit repetitive, but still great. So 9 out of 10, and that is it from me.